Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sports Sitdown. My name is Sunay Sangani, and today I'm joined by Kieran Costa and Nate Martin, our usual hosts for today. However, today we have a very special guest on our show, and we have a special edition of Sports Sitdown because we're in quarantine, but we also will have in-depth analysis from San Jose Mercury news reporter Dieter Kurtenbach. Dieter, how are you today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, guys.
Wonderful. I'm going to start out with this. With the NBA. The NBA bubble is starting back in July 30th. It's in Orlando. Teams are going to be restricted in the Disney World campus. They are ready to go. Practice courts are being filled in. Teams are flying down soon, or some already have, for training camp. There are some insiders, however, who have said that this is a season and whoever wins the season, their championship should have an asterisk on it, meaning that it shouldn't be really counted as a full hard-earned NBA title. Personally, I don't believe that because I actually think it makes it harder. What are your opinions on that, and do you think there should be an asterisk put on this new NBA season?
This is a typical NBA conversation in the fact that everybody wants to qualify everything in the NBA. The NBA is a soap opera league led by narratives that lends itself to a lot of interest from casual fans, which is how they make a lot of money. But the notion of a literal asterisk is completely asinine. Everybody is dealing with the same situation. Everybody has to handle it in the same sort of a manner. And while circumstances are not normal, it's beyond the pale to think that this championship would mean any less. And I think that the only way to really look at it is, in 10 years, will anyone really remember the circumstances in which the title was won, in which it will be most likely in an empty arena in Orlando with no fans and extremely peculiar circumstances. I don't think that will hold up as some sort of thing that needs to be marked for all of time in even a few years, much less in the decades to come. So I get it. I understand how the NBA operates and how its media machines operate around it, and that this is a good conversation. But you guys are Warriors fans, or you at least know enough about the Warriors. Like, everybody's trying to put an asterisk on everything ever. Nothing will ever be good enough in the NBA, and this is just too easy a fodder. And truth be told, the NBA, the league itself, isn't recognizing any of these conversations. So it's not something to worry about. It's just something to talk about, which seems to be the NBA's MO these days.
Speaking of the NBA reopening, do you have any thoughts on how you think Rudy Gobert will be received? He took some backlash from the media, fans, and even Donovan Mitchell, his own teammate, when everyone was blaming him for the NBA being shut down. Do you think he gets any negative feedback from media, other teams, when the NBA reopens in the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, it would be ridiculous to think that there won't be any. It's probably going to be, again, overstated in terms of its severity. I do think that it's important to note that Rudy Gobert, as strange as it is and as glib as he was in the lead up to him testing positive all those months, or it feels like years ago, like, he did, his testing positive did accelerate the nation's lockdown to whatever degree there was a lockdown. And in a weird sort of passive aggressive way, like, Rudy Gobert saved lives. I know that that's ridiculous and we shouldn't put too much, emphasis on that, but like, Rudy Gobert, like a very high profile person in the NBA testing positive the way that he did, forced all of the major sports leagues to take it seriously. The NBA had to shut down that day. The rest of the sports leagues and the NCAA tournament were shut down by the next afternoon. And once you see billion-dollar businesses just shutting down like that, it kind of forces everybody to take it far more seriously. Certainly, Rudy Gobert, I imagine, wishes that he wasn't the face of the coronavirus in professional sports, but it certainly wasn't an overreaction at the time. I think that's been proven day in and day out. And so maybe there will be some negative stuff. I think it will probably be just some lighthearted joking. And truth be told, he's the safest player in that entire bubble because he's the only one that – there's a few, certainly, but he's got the antibodies. So I do think there'll probably be a little bit of ribbing, but I think anyone who goes overboard and really pushes it would be out of bounds in that regard.
Now, obviously, basketball coming back for the first time in 4 or 5 months. How different will basketball be without players playing 5v5 for 4 months?
They're going to suck out of the gate. It is going to be terrible basketball. JJ Redick admitted this as much a couple of days ago. He's like, we're going to be so bad. You're also now taking into account that you have some straight up bad teams in this bubble, because the Eastern Conference has a couple of teams that are under 500, and anyone who was within 5-6 games was allowed into the bubble. The 25-win Washington Wizards got invited to the tournament. So we're going to have to watch a bad team play their worst basketball of the year. I can see why the NBA is putting all of the games sort of on a NCAA tournament schedule where it starts in the morning and just keeps going at night, because if they tried to split it up to where everybody was in prime time, people would turn off the television. There's going to be some really bad almost preseason quality basketball out there on the court. And frankly, there are probably going to be preseason quality players out on the court because there are going to be a lot of people that opt out, and a lot of guys who don't opt out, their teams don't have a chance in hell of actually making the playoffs. And so they're just going to sit on the bench and they'll treat it like a summer league. So it's going to be a real hot mess early on. We just have to survive a couple of weeks until we get to the playoffs, and maybe even the first round will still be a bit of a mess, as it always is. But once we get into the real nitty gritty, the heart of the playoffs, I imagine that everyone will be warmed up, everyone will be loose, everyone will kind of found their rhythm after this long layoff. They won't have to pretend as if they weren't practicing in secret in the lead up and maybe messing up some possessions just to get the scent off of them. I imagine that the playoffs will be every bit as good as you usually expect. But in the interim, it's not going to be fun to watch for a lot of those games.
How do you make the whole Pelicans Grizzlies 8 seed chase? Do you think they're going to be some surprise teams, even in the East, with the Wizards and the Nets, a lot of Nets players sitting out? Do you think there are surprise teams that are going to come out and make the playoff bubble?
Probably not. The Western Conference is certainly more interesting of a dynamic. The Pelicans have more talent. Maybe this break is a positive. Let Zion get a little bit of rest. You know what he can look like when he's at full explosion. He was starting to look a little tired, even though he didn't play that many games. Very interested to see what the Grizzlies do. They have the upper hand for a reason. 8 games is not that many to make a big move. That leaves no margin for error for a lot of teams, especially the ones like the Kings and the Pellies that are as far back. I imagine that it will be chalk when it comes to dealing with who makes the playoffs. The real question is the seeding. And you look at the Western Conference in particular, I mean, the 7 seed could be the 3 seed with the 2-game swing. If I'm remembering correctly, I don't have it in front of me. Like that is significant. While home court advantage doesn't matter, and so maybe seeding is more of a battle to get the matchups that you want in the first round. The fact that it is so tight and that there are still regular season games that are being played, I imagine that there's going to be some mixing and matching and some things that we've become so familiar with looking at the exact same standings since March. I imagine there's going to be some fairly significant changes, and I don't know if that'll be entirely deliberate. I'm certain that there will be some deliberate movement, usually down with the deliberate movement, so that they get a matchup they want. But I think that some teams are going to come back energized from this, whereas other teams are going to be a lot sloppier and kind of what we've now, established as the standing order. While, again, the playoff teams, I think, stay the same, we might have a pretty big shift, both Eastern and Western Conference, in terms of who's going to play who in the first round of the playoffs.
Who do you have taking it all, real quick?
There's 2 answers to that question.
Go ahead.
Who do I think actually will win it all? Who do I think is the team that is the best team? I'm going to go with the Clippers. I think if the Clippers fully actualize themselves, and that is a big ask. If Kawhi Leonard can use these 3 months wisely, if Paul George used these 3 months wisely, or 4 months, or 10 years, whatever it was, they have 2 elite wings, and the NBA playoffs are all about elite wings. The last 9 NBA Finals MVPs have been wings. So I would bet on them. I don't like the Lakers' depth. If I had to place an actual bet, if I was looking at the odds and saying, who do I like? Who is the best value? It's the Houston Rockets, and it's not even particularly close. The Rockets, as you guys know, are a really damn good basketball team. Now, the issue is they kept running into the Golden State Warriors. And I don't like anything that the Rockets do in terms of aesthetic styles of I think it's antithetical to the spirit of the game of basketball, the way that they play. But it works. It wins a lot of games. And the biggest issues that the Rockets have had this season, I think, are now rectified. Their first one is they didn't know how to utilize Russell Westbrook and James Harden at the same time. So they just decided we're not going to play a center anymore. And you have free reign to the hoop, much in the same way the Milwaukee Bucks do it, while actually keeping a center out there. So now they have Westbrook and Harden operating at maximum capacity. That is an incredible tandem of players. Again, I don't like the way that they play basketball, but you can't argue with the success. Then you look at, well, what have been their other issues? They stink on the road in the playoffs, and they stink on the road in the playoffs because the home crowd can influence the whistle. That is a major part of the NBA playoffs. The referees do not want to go against the home crowd. It's just human nature. You can't hold it against them. There are no home crowds anymore. So the referees are going to call it straight down the middle, and that means James Harden is going to get a lot more foul calls than he usually gets in the playoffs. You also now have to take into account that James Harden is going to be rested. He usually tuckers himself out by the end of the season going for some scoring title. He's been sitting in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights, and he looks slimmer, which might be a problem because he does use a little bit of that weight in his game, especially on the defensive side, or quote-unquote defensive side. But if he's healthy, now he can give you all-out effort for the next 3-4 months, which normally he'd fade when the going really got tough. And then I think one more thing on top of this, and this is something that I've just experienced having covered the Warriors now for the last 5 years and being on the road with the team in Houston countless times over the last couple of years. That Houston crowd, that Houston home crowd, when they are playing the Warriors, does not believe that they can beat Golden State. They do not believe in their team to overcome the adversity of the moments. They are expecting the worst. And I have seen that energy permeate throughout the crowd at Toyota Center, and I have seen it affect the Rockets in a negative way. You can't convince me that it didn't happen. That home crowd is not an advantage for Houston. It is a negative. They don't have to deal with that now either. They are sitting in an arena. They are playing AAU basketball. They're playing pickup hoops. And honestly, if you were telling me, I got a pickup hoop team, I like Anthony Davis, I like LeBron James, don't get me wrong, they're really good. But Anthony Davis, can you trust him to stay healthy? LeBron's going to be rested, yes, but does he have the dudes around him beyond Anthony Davis to get the job done? Danny Green can't run anymore. Kawhi Leonard, I mean, who's Zubac? Which center is going to dominate the Houston Rockets in a one-on-one matchup? Is Zubac going to drop 35 points a game in the playoffs? I don't see it happening. So the Houston Rockets have a really clear path. I imagine that they're going to handle their seeding effectively. And I think that everything is lining up for them, a team that has been as close as any to winning the championship outside of the other teams that did win the championship beyond the Warriors the last couple of years. I honestly think that they have a really straightforward path, and they're not getting enough respect from bookmakers. I would take the Rockets. I would take the Rockets in the odds. And I feel actually fairly comfortable just picking the Rockets overall, even though I do think that the Clippers are the best equipped, all things considered, to win the title.
I really like your Clippers pick personally. Like, as a Warriors fan, watching Kawhi run through us in the finals was hard to watch. Yeah. And playoff Kawhi was unstoppable in 2014 against the Heat. He was unstoppable against the Sixers. I really like that Clippers pick, mainly because of Kawhi, but also they got a great supporting cast.
Yeah, that's the thing. They have a ton of depth. They're going to come at you for 48 minutes straight. If you stagger Paul George and Kawhi, now you have an elite top 5 wing in the NBA on the court at all times. Again, the entire NBA playoffs are decided by power wings. You have, Kawhi on LeBron. That cannot be understated, especially with so much of the Lakers riding on LeBron. I like some of their defensive matchups, their ability to space out against the Lakers, who are going to play 2 centers on the court at the same time, in JaVale and Anthony Davis, or at least that's what they showed in the regular season. I can't think that was an accident or some sort of sandbag. So listen, there are, and we haven't talked about the Bucks yet. They're really, really good. And I think the Celtics can make some waves too. Like, I do think that this is going to be a really excellent NBA playoffs. There's a lot of talent, a lot more talent than, I can remember in honestly recent years, outside of obviously the Dubs. But like, man, I can't get over I can't get over how good the Rockets were looking right before we all went into the bubble, and how the circumstances have bounced out for them. But if the Clippers won, it wouldn't shock me one bit. I just wouldn't it be the ultimate 2020 answer that the Houston Rockets, the team that can't win in the playoffs, actually win in the playoffs? That feels right. That feels succinct.
Moving on to the MLB, I see you there wearing the White Sox hoodie with the 60-game season. Which teams do you think can surprise us? The A's, historically slow starters. They were below They were below 500 60 games through last year, and they ended up making the playoffs. We see the White Sox. They're a young team. They have Kopech, Giolito. Now their pitching staff's healthy. Could you see them and any other surprise teams making a run in a shortened season? White Sox, for example, play the Royals and Tigers, two terrible teams, so many times in such a short span.
Yeah, I'm feeling very optimistic about my Chicago White Sox. I feel good about it. At the same time, there's no margin for error, right? So I think that there are going to be teams that over 162-game season you would expect to be really good. And we're talking about the best of the best. We're talking Yankees, Dodgers, Red Sox. We're talking about Astros. Teams like that, if they have 2 bad weeks, they might be buried. It's a very astute point to bring up the way that the schedule will be structured. I think that, there's a real good chance for teams in the Central where there is a lot of crap to really rack up some win totals compared to teams in the West, where it's pretty even across the board, maybe not spectacular. But it's not like there's some absolute dud in either of the Wests, especially with just 60 games to play. And in the East, you're gonna get games against the Marlins, but man, I think Toronto has a really interesting shot at doing some stuff, despite the fact that they play in that tough division. I think that they're just a bunch of really good teams, and it seems as if the majority of the really bad teams are in the Central Division. So if you wanted to pick a team to maybe be the surprise to have the most wins, I think that the Central Division, whether it be the Cardinals or the Cubs or the Brewers or the White Sox or I guess the Indians, I don't know who else is any good in the AL Central anymore. Twins, I mean, any of those teams I think could be a viable option to have the overall win total. But you think about 60 games, and I like the way that the Giants have been looking at the situation, which is we got dropped into a playoff race. We just get to skip the first 100 games and we're all even in the standings. I mean, if you were a bad team or a team that wasn't expected to contend going into this year, and somebody told you, let's just say, the world didn't completely stop on its axis, and someone were to tell you, hey, you're going to get to start play in, late July, and you're going to be even. You're going to be even tied for first place in the standings with everybody else. Oh my God, some of these teams would be absolutely elated because the first 100 games just separates teams. And the last 60 is where the cream really rises to the top. And I am not going to count out any team, not even the Marlins, in terms of their ability to actually do something. Because as we saw with the Giants last year, there was a stretch where they won 37 out of 60 games. I mean, that's probably good enough to really compete for a wild card spot. You look at the A's, they had a stretch where they were one of the worst teams in baseball over 60 games. Now, of course, they won 97 at a certain juncture, but it's just man, I have no idea. And especially with the way that the pitching rotations and the staffs are going to be handled, where we're going to have 6, 7, maybe 8-man rotations and, starting pitchers going 3-4 innings at the most early on. And maybe it never really opens up that much. It's going to be a completely different sport from the way that we have viewed it over the last couple of years. And I just think it would be foolhardy to say that anything is off the table. The entire sport is structured to be a macro thing. Everything is supposed to play out over 162. And if you're good enough, you have the depth, whatever, best organizations win over 162. What happens when you're in a demolition derby? You could go out in the first lap. I mean, and it's going to be absolutely fascinating. If you want to talk about asterisks, here's an asterisk for you. But I'm really, really looking forward to it. And I'm hoping that my White Sox, a team that, I've loved for 30 years now can get their heads out of their asses and finally do something.
Yes. Speaking of the West, I was just thinking on your point, it's all a shortened season. I was thinking the Rangers for two reasons. Last year at the wild card or at the All-Star break, they were in wild card contention. Last year, for 60 games, they were in the postseason. And their pitching staff is very old. They have Corey Kluber, Mike Minor, and I think by game 120, all those pitchers will be gassed. They don't have to play 162 games. And staying in the
that's a good point.
My favorite news story, maybe ever, the Houston Astros cheated. As a Yankees fan, that makes me so happy. And that makes me so happy that they cheated. And do you think they're winners or losers of this quarantine and no fans at MLB? Because in spring training, they were being constantly booed every stadium they went into. They were hit by the pitch 10 times in the first 10 games. How do you think this pause and no fans will affect them? As we all thought they were going to get lots of negative feedback every stadium they went to.
Listen, there's no guarantee that there won't be some fans in the stadium, and they'll be loud. I think Houston is already saying that they're going to have fans in the stadium, so that will be positive for them. They win in that regard. There's no question about that. But that is also one of the best teams in Major League Baseball. And 162 games, that was going to bear itself out. And they lose by not having the full depth of a season that you would normally expect. They lose because they built for one thing and now they're getting another thing. So I think most of the really good teams, the teams that were expected to be, excellent this season, the Dodgers, Yankees to a certain degree, Astros, those teams are losers. Those teams, even if there's some upside, and everyone can find the upside in 60 games, those teams lost because they had a competitive advantage that was built up over several years. And for at least 1 year, that competitive advantage is lost. And that can't sit well. So I do think that, they'll avoid some booing, and they won't have to take, some of that abuse. I'm not sure it will dissipate. I think 2021 will get it all in eventually. But I think that ultimately when you look at it, they're losers because now they're actually having to fight for something. Whereas normally it would just kind of take care of itself over the course of a $1.62.
Now you mentioned the Giants earlier. Obviously, the last couple of years have had great stretches in the late summer months of July, right before the trade deadline would come up. How do you think this will affect them and the A's? Kieran mentioned how the A's have a historically bad start, especially considering the Giants are in rebuild mode right now.
Yeah, I'm a little bit frustrated, if I'm being honest, with how the Giants are handling it. Obviously, as someone who supports both Bay Area baseball teams as a columnist and wants to see the teams do well, not for just myself, but for the fans. I like it when people are happy, but we'll call it out when they stink. I don't know if they did enough. I think that they've been given an incredible opportunity here to make something out of their season, and I don't think that they're capitalizing on it, at least not at this moment that we're talking. I think it's preposterous that they haven't signed Yasiel Puig yet. I just don't understand why you would think that Darren Ruff or Pablo Sandoval or Hunter Pence is a better option than Puig. Statistically, it just doesn't line up. I think that they need to go all in on the 60-game season and see what they can make of it. This is a team that has had 3 straight losing years. You have a fan base that is disillusioned from the notion that they can be interesting over a 162-game season, as well they should be. And now you've been given this reprieve for 1 year that won't mess up anything long-term for you. And I don't think they're taking the best advantage of it. I really don't. If you're trying to turn this season into an ability to build up prospects, I don't know what you're going to learn in 60 games. I just think that I think that every team in Major League Baseball, this is certainly not the case when it's a 162-game season, but every team in Major League Baseball should be looking at it and saying, we're all in. We're all in on 60. We are absolutely going for it. We're going to try to win. Whereas half of the teams in baseball just don't try to win, it seems, every single year. they've been given an opportunity to do so. I think it's a disservice to the fans who have been crapped on for the last couple of months, day in and day out, and told how little that they matter to the owners and the players. I think it's a disservice to not take full advantage of this wacky, ridiculous season that they have going on. So I think that they're, I think that they're going to do fine. I just don't know if they're going to maximize the opportunity. I'm fascinated to see what it is with the A's. I think the A's are extremely well equipped for this sort of a thing. They have been operating with shortened or longer staffs, shortened innings, a lot of platoons nonstop. So I think that they're going to be in a really good position to make some waves, but they have to get over that slow start that you guys brought up. It is not good, and that's a team that really needs to warm up. Maybe their experience now over the last couple of years will, I don't know, instill some professionalism from day one and have them, ready to go out of the gate. When you're not counting out the Marlins, it'd be stupid to say that the Giants couldn't do anything. And the A's, who won 97 games last year, clearly as talented as any team in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, just maybe not as well put together, maybe not as deep, but on the top end as talented as any team in baseball. I mean, why can't they? Why can't they go out there and do it? I think their pitching staff has improved. I think that Chapman and Olsen are both viable MVP candidates this year. We saw what Simeon did last year. He's playing for big money this upcoming offseason. I really like a lot of what the A's have done. I think that they're a really nice option, not just to do very well in the regular season, but to also maybe win the whole damn thing when it's all said and done. I don't know what the odds are on that, but I don't see any reason not to take a long shot bet on the Oakland A's to do it because, I think that they are in particular. They've handled their business day in and day out for the last couple of years in a manner that befits a 60-game season.
One last thing on the MLB, again staying in the AL West. Can you give us your AL MVP candidate frontrunner? I'm thinking Shohei Ohtani for this reason. He's going to pitch once a week and hit 4 times a week. If he's even a minor plus on both those sides, let's say he hits 250 and gets, say, 7 wins, that would still – I say that's still an MVP candidate year if he's helping his team on both sides of the ball.
It's really hard to say because 60 games is nothing, right? Anyone can get hot for 60. I'll say this. It's going to be directly correlated to team overall success in ways that it hasn't been in recent years, where Mike Trout, who hasn't made the playoffs in how long, just keeps winning MVP. He's awesome. I'm not arguing that he's not great, but baseball has so disassociated itself from winning and greatness and winning. They're no longer associated. It's an individual sport that is begrudgingly practiced by teams, at least in the viewpoint of so many who are around it on a day-to-day basis. And that is, I think, a death knell for the sport overall. But I think that this year, because there will be a lot of surprises, the narrative will lend itself to team with the most success, best player on that team. I agree with you on Ohtani. 250 isn't going to do it because there's going to be somebody who's going to come up close to 400. Even in this era of super strikeouts, it's just not a large enough sample size. Any player who gets above 20 home runs just because they got hot at the right time, which turns out to be the whole season, they have a chance to be the MVP. I will tell you this, don't expect the pitcher to be anywhere near it. Maybe a closer if they're absolutely dominant and they are out there for 50-something games. Maybe a closer has a chance to do it. So I would look into that market a little bit. But, it is total crapshoot. And I think there's a legitimate possibility that somebody you would never expect. I mean, some guy who bats 4th or 5th on maybe Joey Gallo is the MVP of the American League. Like there's nothing saying that anybody is doing it because again, the entire thing is built for 162 and the great players are the ones who at the end of the day have had enough hot streaks over the course of the season and few cold streaks to where their numbers stack up. and they separate from everybody else because they're playing this very long season, and injuries can, certainly screw you over. And that's the reason that Trent hasn't won as many MVPs as probably he thought he would. But 60 games, anything is on the table. One guy is going to get hot and contend close to 400. Some guy's going to come close to maybe hitting 30 home runs in a year. And who the hell knows? I mean, we're going to have some crazy numbers on the high end for the MVP race. And then we're going to have some crazy numbers on the low end too. There's going to be a bunch of guys who hit less than 200 on the entire season. And that's just going to be a weird stain on their reputation for years to come.
So moving on a note of uncertainty, I'm going to move on to the Warriors off season.
Yeah.
I can't wait to get to talk to you about that. I've been waiting to ask you this question.
Hit me.
What are your insights on it's been a quarantine fan talk. Obviously, there's no confirmed sources on this or anything. What are your insights on Giannis to the Warriors? It seems like it could happen if the Bucks do bad in the NBA playoff bubble. But also, what are some of the backup options that are more viable for the Warriors because they do have that $17 million trade exception?
Well, Giannis wouldn't apply with the $17 million trade exception. So, listen, it's not impossible. It is a bit of a pipe dream. It would take a lot of fortune going the Warriors' way. Maybe it happens. I'm not saying it won't. They're in position to do it. But ultimately, the Bucks would really have to stink. They would have to feel fundamentally flawed in order for Giannis to want to exit. You have to take into account with European-born players, they don't typically change teams. It is not, they didn't grow up in the AAU system in the United States where best player controls everything from, the age of 13 on. There is a level of appreciation for even small market teams because these are opportunities that oftentimes didn't feel possible for, European-born players. I don't think that Giannis is going to crap all over the Bucks and do a player empowerment thing. Now, if he's about winning championships and if he feels like the Bucks can't win a championship, then he might bolt and he would probably go to Golden State or Miami or, another team that's well equipped. And there are a bunch of teams that are setting up in an effort to woo him if he does indeed come on the trade market. I think that the Warriors have as good of a package as anybody, and all they can do between now and that moment, if it ever comes, is, build up their arsenal to make that happen. Let's also take into account right now, they believe they're in a championship window and they need to maximize their potential to win championships in the next couple of years while Draymond Green and Klay Thompson are 30 years old and Steph Curry's 32. These guys have a lot of miles on the odometer. So we're talking about that 17.2 million, 17.18 million trade exception. Who can they get? The only question is it isn't who they should get, it's how much of it will they use. And what they need to do is very clearly get as much of that trade exception used as possible so that they have a larger, salary spot available to them that they can then in December or January of next year, if they don't like the fit of that player, they can move it and they can get somebody in at 20% more than that. It is all accounting at this point for the Golden State Warriors. When you're pushing up against the luxury tax the way that they are, it's an accounting game. And there is almost it's not always, perfect, but there is a really good correlation between cost of player and excellence of player. So 17.2, yes, you might not get the best player at that price, but maybe there is a $17 million player down the line or a $19 or $20 million player down the line that you can flip that guy for with some of those assets, perhaps from the Giannis trade. And now you have a much better team. I'm of the mindset that they should take their first round pick this year, the one that's going to be either number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and they should package it with whatever needs to be packaged and that trade exception to get the best possible player for that spot. And I'm thinking a guy like Will Barton, and that would be more of a pick swap with the Denver Nuggets. I'm thinking a guy like Marcus Smart with Boston, again, a pick swap. And then maybe there's a third team involved and the Warriors don't drop down that far, but they stay somewhere in the top 10. But they then get a player who is certainly going to help them in the here and now. You look at the way that the Warriors are structured, they have a couple of guys who are on, let's be real, their last legs here. And they only have a couple of more pushes left before those legs give out. Windows are always shorter than they seem in the NBA. The fact that the Warriors went to 5 straight NBA finals is flabbergasting. Does not happen. Windows are tight. And that's when you have the best players in the world. Warriors don't have that anymore. They still have Steph Curry. They still have but Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, outstanding players, tremendous players. You want them on any team that you're coaching. Draymond stunk last year. All indications are that Draymond's never going to be the Draymond that we saw in the first half of Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals ever again. Klay is 30 years old. He is coming off of an ACL injury. Yes, everyone loves Klay. But, man, is it a guarantee that he is back to 100% Klay? Absolutely not. Steph is 32 years old. And, yes, he is incredible. But now everybody's playing like Steph. Steph is not the enigma anymore. And yes, he's still a rarity and he's still the best to do it, but it's not ridiculous to think that the league is caught up to him a little bit. So they bring in Andrew Wiggins, who's 25 years old. And the idea is he's going to help. He'll also be a trade chip for Giannis. You can get a draft pick along with him. He'll be the next wave. As he comes into his own, he will help pick up some of the slack that the aging superstars that they have are falling off. I don't know what a 19-year-old is going to do for them. And especially a 19-year-old in a draft that is being, derided as the worst one in decades. Yes, there will be superstar or superstars from this draft. No one knows where the hell they're coming from. No one. It could be the number 1 pick. It could be the number 35 pick. No one knows. It's a bad draft. Get out of that. Get out of a bad marketplace and get into players that are helpful today. And if they have some upside, that'd be great, but you don't even need that because you have the Timberwolves pick for next year. The Warriors are in a very strange spot. I think that what they do this offseason, whenever the hell this offseason actually starts, it'll probably be in the middle of the fall, what they do will set themselves up for success or failure for the next 3 or 4 years. This is the most critical offseason that they have had. Well, I guess since last year when they had to figure out if Kevin Durant was staying or going. They truthfully knew that he was going. So I'm fascinated to see what they do. Again, it's a lot of accounting, which isn't as much fun, but ultimately it is what dictates success. The Warriors, more than any other team, are willing to spend money. You are now going to see a dramatic reduction in revenues coming into teams. There will be teams that say, we're not spending money anymore. Houston Rockets, case in point. Denver Nuggets, case in point. They're going to say, we can't afford all these rich guys. We're going to get rid of them. We don't want to even come close to that luxury tax line because the luxury tax line is probably going down. And so what can Joe Lacob and Peter Gruber, the owners of the Warriors, do to maximize their position as the richest team in the NBA and a team that's in a position to win? Will they play it safe or will they press their advantage? And how hard will they press that advantage for both the present and the near future and the long-term future? What they do with that draft pick, what they do with the trade exception, and what they do overall to maximize their roster going into the 2021 season is going to tell us everything we need to know about Giannis, about what they think of Draymond Green and Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, and about ultimately what they think of the team, what they think the team is going to look like in 2026, 2027, when those guys are clearly going to be over the hill. And there's no question about it. I'm fascinated to find out. And I'm fascinated to see if anyone wants to help the Warriors out at all, because obviously it takes 2 to tango with trades and free agency. I think that a lot of goodwill has been used up by the Golden State Warriors over the last couple of years through no fault of their own, just through winning. And I'm fascinated to see if a team is willing to be swindled this offseason, because they have found willing customers in recent years. And now, the reputation is maybe you shouldn't do business with the Warriors because you always lose. So I have as many questions as you do about it. I don't think that there's any definitive insight that I can provide other than trying to present the contextualization that they have to figure it out now. There's no room to mess around. Every year is sacred when you have a core like this, and that it's not as strong as it was just a couple of years ago. You have to maximize that opportunity, and so be it if you miss out on somebody who could really be great in 3 or 4 years. You have 3 or 4 years right here, right now, and you spent decades, this franchise has spent decades looking to extend this window as long as it can go. It's a bad year to be a bad team, but they have no excuse not to be a great team again next year, given the assets and the opportunities that they have at hand. So it'll be interesting. And if it turns out it's Giannis, well, then there's another decade of greatness in the books. And and we won't be talking about, minute stuff like this anymore.
Personally, as a Warriors fan, I'm really interested to see what they do as a pick. I'm in the boat that you are in and saying that we should trade this. I'd love to get someone in like an Aaron Gordon or Kelly Oubre, another wing player that can step up and provide some offense when needed. But suppose they get the number one pick. Is there any prospect that the Warriors, like with the number one pick, that they have to take? If they're there?
No, there's not anyone who needs to be selected. Listen, it will be either Anthony Edwards or Okongwu out of USC. I don't think they'll take Tyrese Halliburton number one. The worst kept secret in the NBA right now is that the Warriors are trying to trade their draft pick, no matter where it is, so that they can get to like 4 or 5. I guess if it's 5, they'll be fine. They like Halliburton a lot. They just don't like him at 1. There is a theory. I won't say it's more than a theory, floating around by people in the know that they'll feel obliged to take Edwards at number 1, that they feel that it would be stupid not to, and they'd have to, if it's 51-49, that they'll just go the 51 route, that they feel like his upside is too much to pass up. Okongwu is probably, I think, the best option for them, the most ready-made option for them in the draft, 6'9", big man out of USC, who just fits exactly what it is they're trying to do at center. But they like Marquise Chris. So, I think that they should trade it, as do you. They think they should trade it because they're shopping it to everybody and they don't even know where they're picking yet. It's a bad draft, and you're better off just in the middle, taking a wild card, than you are having to be beholden. And let's not underestimate how much these players cost. These young rookies cost big money. It's $7-8 million a year, which, listen, compared to what they can make down the line, nothing. But for a team that's up against the luxury tax, you're paying a 250% premium on that. So, and what's a 19-year-old again going to do for you in 2021? I just don't see it being a very good situation for the Warriors if they end up with the number 1 pick. I think it'd be a curse more than a blessing, unless there's somebody out there who feels some sort of way about Anthony Edwards. And right now, I'm just not hearing anybody rave about him. It almost feels perfunctory that you have to take him because he's the best player in a crappy draft.
Well, in my opinion, go ahead.
I'm just curious. What's the James Wiseman? What are you hearing about him and because that's before, of course, he got suspended and taken out of Memphis. That was the write-in pick for the Warriors. What are you hearing about him?
The Warriors will not select James Wiseman because the Warriors will not select a legitimate number 5 big man. They just won't do it. Steve Kerr doesn't value him enough. Not at the number. I mean, this is where the salary comes into play. You're going to pay James Wiseman $8 million a year to play 20 minutes a game, just given the way that the Warriors structure their center minutes. No. Does he provide you anything in year 1 that's going to be better than Marquise Chris? No. Is he have a chance to be a perennial NBA All-Star and a guy who is dominant on both ends of the court? No. I mean, he really doesn't. I mean, at best, he's Rudy Gobert, and Rudy Gobert doesn't play in the playoffs because he's too big and they move him around. Beyond that, he doesn't fit in what the Warriors want to do on offense. They really doesn't. The Warriors like to play a 5-man motion weave offense. James Wiseman has to be in pick and roll. And maybe that's something that the Warriors should consider more seriously down the line. Like maybe we do more pick and roll stuff compared to years prior, because it will, accentuate our strengths while minimizing some of our weaknesses, which is our depth at this juncture. But that's not how Steve Kerr views it. So James Wiseman, yes, it's very easy to see, he would fit. What do the Warriors need? They need a center. Here's James Wiseman. He's the best center in this class. But he doesn't fit because the Warriors don't care about centers. They don't. Draymond Green is their center. If they have, if they go with Okongwu out of USC, he is a small ball center who can space the floor and play the 4. I just don't see Wiseman. I know people who let me give you some quick insight here. during this period of time, there are two kinds of sources. There are team sources and there are agent sources. And agent sources lie and team sources lie. And no one knows what the hell they're talking about right now. So agent sources will look at it and go, well, that makes logical sense because they're not thinking about it in a schematic way. And team sources will lie because they're trying to put up smoke signals. I'll say this, talking to people that I trust, people that I trust enough to where I wouldn't put this in a massive report or something, but you talk to enough people, you get a pretty damn good sense of the situation. James Weissman's not going to be a Golden State Warrior. Let somebody else deal with that. If the Warriors really cared about getting a center, they would have traded for Clint Capella. They don't care about center, and they're sure as hell not going to pay one over $20 million a year in actual money at 19 years old. It's just not going to happen. There's not enough value in that position for the Golden State Warriors to use their draft pick on that one. And the only guy that I can see maybe them making an exception for is Okongwu, because he is a modern Bam Adebayo style center who can also handle the damn ball and play sort of the Draymond Green role when Draymond's not on the floor. But taking him at number one, that might be a stretch.
I personally really like Okongwu and Obi Toppin, who also kind of plays that small forward, power forward role.
The issue with Toppin is that his center of gravity is somewhere just beneath his nose, and he's older, which you could say is an advantage for the Warriors in the sense that he's not going to need that much seasoning. He just does not have a good all-around game, if I'm being totally honest with you. He's not going to knock down shots as a dead-eye shooter. He gets a lot of his stuff at the rim. The entire Dayton offense, it's a nice offense. It's a pretty offense, but most of it is just him doing floppy actions so that he can get to the basket. That just won't work in the NBA. He does not have the athleticism to be able to get to the hoop with that kind of aplomb like he did at Dayton in the NBA. He's going up against Atlantic 10 opponents. Some team is going to say that works out. At best, he's Aaron Gordon. And Aaron Gordon's a good player, but man, like Aaron Gordon's also had to develop an entire new shot. At best, he's Blake Griffin. Blake Griffin has gotten traded around so many times to where now he had to basically reinvent his game to be an outside shooter. The entire league is on the perimeter. Obi Toppin does not exist well around the perimeter. He looks good. This is something that you have to talk about when you're talking about scouting. He looks the part. If you're looking for a Bam Adebayo type center, okay, Okongwu obviously fits the mold. But then you look at Obi Toppin and you go, oh, he could be a Draymond type, this and that. Yeah, except he doesn't play like that at all. He doesn't have the handles. He doesn't have the defensive awareness. He doesn't have the perimeter game that Draymond has. Even if it's just dish and dive, he just gets to the basket a lot, and he's a really cool dunker. And again, some team, probably the Sacramento Kings, will make the mistake and say like, oh, this guy's going to be really good. And maybe he is. No one knows. But I let me put it to you this way. I think it's more likely that James Weissman's a Golden State Warrior than Obi Toppin.
Finally, with this Warriors segment wrapping up, next year is a big year for the Warriors. This offseason is a big time for the Warriors. If they have a good offseason, do you see an aging Warriors team as contenders next year? And if so, where do they fall into the Western Conference? How far do you see them getting?
There's no reason that the Warriors can't win a championship next year if they play their cards right. If they add the requisite depth needed to be a true contender, they're 1, 2, 3 stacks up with anybody. Now, are the Clippers, maybe the Lakers, a better option? Of course. Are the Houston Rockets probably going to be right there too? Yeah, absolutely. And the Mavericks maybe make a jump? Sure. I like Oklahoma City. Like, I think they're a good team. I think that the Warriors could, at their peak, be a team that has home court advantage in the first round of next year's NBA playoffs. So that's a top 4 seed. After that, they're a team with we'll see what happens with this postseason, but they're a team with championship DNA. Let's not forget that they beat the Rockets more or less last year without Kevin Durant, and then they went and absolutely smacked around the Blazers with just their big three. Smacked them around. I mean, embarrassed them on a nightly basis, and they damn near beat the Raptors with Kawhi. If Klay doesn't go out, the Warriors are convinced, and yes, it's delusional, perhaps, but and they're certainly biased. They are convinced that they would have won that series in Game 7 in Toronto. Convinced. They thought the Raptors were cracking at the moment that Klay got that ACL injury. They felt them breaking under the pressure of the Oracle crowd, and they thought that they had it. Kawhi couldn't get up and down the floor. Kyle Lowry couldn't get up and down the floor. And Danny Green has not been able to get up and down the floor since. The Warriors feel very confident in their ability to contend next year, as they did going into this year. The truth is that the ceiling is still exceptionally high. The problem is now the floor is very low, as we found out this year. One guy goes down, they do not have the depth to handle it. They are better equipped now than they were with all of these rookies, all of these first-timers, and D'Angelo Russell, who never fit anything that the Warriors are trying to do as the point guard. Wiggins is a better option for them. And now these guys have some experience, but they need to maximize this offseason. $17 million trade exception, maximize it. First-round draft pick, maximize it. Get every minimum player you can. Money cannot be an object. If you do that, you will have a team that is fully capable of competing for a championship. It just won't be as clear-cut as it looked in the past few years when Kevin Durant was on the damn team. It won't be as obvious. They're going to have to fight for it, but they have the equipment capable to get down and dirty in a battle in the Western Conference, even a great Western Conference. So I just think it would be absolutely ridiculous to write them off. And if they do well this offseason and they're sitting there at 10-1 to win the championship, I pound it all day, every day, because they have something that a lot of these other teams don't have, which is just this ability to take it to another gear when the going gets tough.
Well, there are a lot of questions. We had a lot of questions. Fans have a lot of questions. There's a lot of uncertainty, not only with COVID, but also just in general, the NBA, NFL, and the MLB. It's always fun to talk to a reporter. Thank you so much, Dieter, for stopping by.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
You can find his articles on Mercury News or by typing in dieter.news on Google, and you can find his interviews. Well, have a good July 4th Sports Sit Down, fans. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much.